Hello, I'm Kacee Johnson. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, so we are bringing you a three-part series on some of the most disruptive solutions and risks associated with living in a digital world today. This final episode, Demystifying the Dark Web, we will learn more about the criminals' oasis and the economy of cybercrime. Welcome to the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, the unified voice of the AICPA and CIMA. I'm Kacee Johnson, Strategic Advisor at CPA.com, and I'm based out of the New York City headquarters. Every week, we share insights from inside the accounting and finance profession that help you stay ahead of the curve, whatever business you're in. You can find links and more information in the show notes for this episode or by going to gobeyonddisruption.com. In this episode, Demystifying the Dark Web, we'll be talking about the economy of cybercrime with subject matter expert Dustin from Spycloud. We'll answer questions like, what is the dark web? Why are accounting professionals prime targets? How do we mitigate those risks? So normally we meet our guest and find out where they are calling from and learn a little bit about them personally. This week, we have a unique guest that we can't do that with. Dustin, tell us why.
Hi. So I really like my privacy just because of the line of work that I do. Whenever you're dealing with criminals, sometimes it's very easy for them to take an interest in you, and that's why I prefer to do these things and not use my name. But I do enjoy doing these kinds of podcasts so we can get out there and get the message out to people. But I also do value my privacy as well.
Understand. Well, Dustin is an expert in crimeware and the dark web. He is the senior cybersecurity researcher at Spycloud, a leading technology service that stops criminals from profiting off stolen information by identifying and mitigating online fraud caused by account takeover. In this episode, we'll be talking with Dustin about the dark web, the increased risks associated with the accounting and finance role, and best practices to minimize potential threats. That's why we've called the episode Demystifying the Dark Web. Dustin is an experienced security researcher with a focus on threat intelligence, agile application security, and a passion for open source intelligence and all things automation. He has been a senior security researcher at Spycloud since early 2018, where he has helped customers understand criminal infrastructure and tooling as it relates to account takeover, and how stolen credentials impact businesses and individuals post-breach. Dustin has been a critical contributor to the automated intelligence gathering arm of Spycloud, building a research platform that automates intelligence gathering and ingests millions of stolen credentials per month. Welcome, Dustin.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for that awesome intro.
So tell me a little bit about Spycloud and what exactly does a security researcher do?
It's a very broad field. Security is very important. It's literally everywhere. There's a bunch of different types of niche security roles in the industry. Particularly what I do is have a focus on threat intelligence, where we try to understand criminal tooling and technology and tactics and the things that they're doing, so that we can help protect our customers and fight fraud.
Thank you for the work that you do. Help our audience understand, what exactly is the dark web? What is it really like? And how do you think it compares to what people imagine when they hear the term?
Sure. So let's start with the latter of that and what people seem to think about when they hear the term dark web. It's a scary term. There's even a horror film with dark web in the title. We constantly see ads now where so many companies are offering solutions to try and combat what the dark web is, and try to explain it to people. You know, oh, you need dark web monitoring. Well, why? Why do I need that? What is going on in this dark web, and what does it all mean, right? And really what the dark web is it is a place where criminals in particular, trade stolen information or other types of illicit goods and services. Stolen information has become a hot commodity because it is so accessible. There are entire criminal communities that exist for the sole purpose of sharing, often for free, sometimes for sale, stolen information, because there are many ways that information can be monetized once it gets into the hands of criminals. So once a criminal gets access to that data, that data has value, and they need to go find a place to trade that information. And so that place is the dark web. So the dark web is essentially just a collection of websites and marketplaces that are often engaged in clandestine behavior because of the types of illicit activity that goes on there. You can think of the dark web as like a blanket term, very similar to like, a term like the black market. It's just online, and it's very accessible, although somewhat hidden to the common eye.
And how hard is it for you as the researcher to infiltrate some of those groups where you will then source the data?
Well, that really depends on the group and how they operate. You have low-level criminals that have terrible security hygiene, like anyone else that you would know. Everyone has that uncle that uses the same password for everything, or that family member that uses the same password for everything. It really depends, and criminals are often very paranoid individuals because of the type of activity that they're engaged in. But some are also very opportunistic, and so it just really depends. They can be very particular about who they associate with and how, picking very specific social platforms for their security features. So no logging, the types of encryption that the chat applications use. Some criminal communities will also require you to speak a specific language, or you have to get vouched in, meaning that you need to know another member of that organization who says basically like, hey, this person's cool, or they're with me. Otherwise, you'll be quite suspicious. And we have a world-class team of researchers and investigators at Spycloud that specialize in different areas of focus. This type of work does require a wide array and varying skill set. The human intelligence team is the team that focuses on the social aspect of collecting intelligence on criminal activity in the field by developing relationships with bad actors, managing different types of personas, and things like that. And then we have our investigations team, which works in the field with customers, and sometimes with other investigators from various government agencies, for helping to responsibly disclose things that we may have found in the field that a victim organization may not yet be privy to. So sometimes depending on the things that we find out there, we can be the first to let that company know that, hey, this is what we found. It seems you have an incident on your hand. Please contact law enforcement, and we'll work with them to basically share with you what we found. And then the applied research team, which is the team that I'm a part of, we work to automate the collection of this threat intelligence and understand criminal tooling as it relates to account takeover and fraud.
Fascinating. So what are you seeing in terms of accounting firms or maybe finance departments of large organizations being targets? And obviously their sensitive data, increases their risk, but what are you seeing in terms of any kind of organized targeting of those types of organizations or departments?
Having worked as a security analyst in a security operations center before, and having had to respond to attacks targeting some of our people that work in finance, I've seen firsthand the different sorts of attempts made to target finance organizations. They're a constant target. They've been a target for a very long time, often because the finance organization has privileged access to financial assets. And I believe that these organizations are often more at risk to various types of online crime because of that, because of the access that they have. Everything from emails containing malicious documents disguised as fake invoices to other types of fraud. Back in September, the FBI had released an industry notification warning that credential stuffing attacks were on the rise in the financial sector. They gave a couple examples in that industry notification of some things that were going on. So in July of 2020, the mid-sized financial organization was reported that its internet banking platform had experienced just a constant barrage of login attempts with various credential pairs. Typically, with brute forcing, an attacker would, they target a single account with often thousands of passwords to try and guess the valid password. With credential stuffing, you're taking the brute force part out of that, and you're essentially giving attackers access to compromised credentials that they know for certain could be being used somewhere else. And in this example that the FBI supplied, they were targeting the the online internet banking platform. Not just that, but they also released another example that in January 2020, a New York-based firm had an international money transfer platform that was experiencing a very large credential stuffing attack against their mobile APIs. And this is often because with mobile APIs, they can be less guarded than, say, if you go to log into mybank.com as an example, just because these different areas of the banking application may not be as closely guarded, or they may not, it's common for these attackers to go after these APIs in places that they think will be less guarded. And that's exactly the example that the FBI gave here in that case.
Interesting. And you talked a little bit right there about how hackers are getting the data. Is there specific technology that they're using?
There's all kinds of different ways that attackers can get their hands on your data. It often starts with a vulnerability in a web application. For example, the criminal would find that vulnerability and they would exploit it. And then from there, they would work to exfiltrate the data they've compromised. So this could be personally identifiable information to passwords. Passwords are very common because of the different ways that this can be monetized. Typically, this data is encrypted, or in the case of passwords, it's hashed. So meaning that by design, it is very, very difficult to determine the original password string, but not computationally impossible. It just requires a lot of work and a lot of processing power to work to a word that people use to crack those hashes and those passwords. And because of this, criminals will try and scale their use of sharing this data, or they will try and scale their use of this data by sharing it with their criminal colleagues. And we often ask for help cracking those hashed passwords. And once those hashed passwords are cracked, they find themselves going into these files called combo list. And what a combo list is you can think of it like a spreadsheet just containing the email addresses and passwords known to be associated with that compromised user's email address. And then they'll go out and spray the internet with these tools called account checkers. And what an account checker is it just allows them to take those combo lists of previously compromised passwords and spray the internet, various sites across the internet, from streaming to anything that they think that they can go and resell or monetize. They'll spray the internet trying to get access to, trying to find which people from previous breaches are reusing that same credential from the previous breach across the internet on these other sites. There's a ton of tools out there that the criminals are using. They range from being very, very simple to very, very complex and complicated, and some of them look like legitimate products. They have support and all the things you would expect of a business selling any kind of software application. Actually, on our blog, we got our hands on the source code to an account checker that was being used to target Nintendo around the time the popular game Animal Crossing had come out. We actually analyzed that, and you can find that on our blog. But these criminals are constantly competing for market share, so they want to have the best tool out there, and so they're constantly changing. Yeah, that's sort of just a high level overview of the different kinds of tools that criminals use, and the tools themselves also carry value. Like I said, there's a market for them, so and that changes constantly, just depending on whenever very popular targets might introduce different controls that make their the criminals' tools less effective, to ways that circumvent those controls. So criminals will, we all have been very annoyed when we've had to identify street signs and in a CAPTCHA before. Criminals have tooling that can allow them to bypass controls like that, and it's a constant cat and mouse game.
Yeah, it sounds like their sophistication just keeps growing until you can never rest. You just gotta keep pace with them, or if not, get ahead of them. It's
exactly, yeah. It's ever changing.
Well, we'll continue our conversation shortly as we discuss some practical steps to turn disruption into opportunity. This is the Go Beyond Disruption podcast, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. You can find out more about this podcast and about the rest of our wider project at gobeyonddisruption.com. So, Dustin, let's talk about the economy of stolen data. How much does this stuff cost on the criminal underground?
Well, that really depends, and everything's for sale. So the tools that we had talked about, the combo lists, private compromised databases that may not be very public, access to internal networks at companies all over the world, proxies for hiding the origin of the criminal's credential stuffing campaign, and to also help them mitigate authentication controls. There's no shortage of things that are for sale to commit this type of fraud. Just to give you an example, a compromised media streaming account can go for $3, whereas a combo list can go for something like, let's say, $30, and some even cheaper depending on the origin of the data and if it's public or not. And then private compromised databases that can go for hundreds and even thousands of dollars. And the reason the value on those changes is because it depends on how useful that information is to a criminal. If it's breach data that is previously unknown, meaning that those passwords are not known to be compromised, and they are able to crack a lot of those hashes from that breach, they'll be the only ones monetizing that information, and so they're incentivized to share it in their closed network. But it often does become public, and even whenever it does become public, it's still valuable for quite a long time.
And what types of data are the most valuable?
Well, there's many different ways criminals can monetize stolen information. Oftentimes, it's not just the data itself that carries value, but it's how they can monetize that data. And so really what that means is whenever, that's exactly why criminals launch their credential stuffing campaigns, is to figure out what they have access to, because they might have that compromised credential, but they have to go out and map out places on the internet that they can use that credential. And that's really what credential stuffing is. And the different types of information that make it more valuable is really sort of like what I just mentioned about the private databases and how they can be used by criminals to basically get ahead of their competition to get access to the most accounts, because they're working with data that isn't known to be compromised. We've seen criminals taking advantage of currency systems for popular online games. So this in-game currency carries value, and some of the players in these games will look for cheaper ways to get ahead in the game. And so they'll go to places like eBay or other secondhand selling places and look for cheap in-game currency. So oftentimes you've seen them at stores where you can buy gift cards that have this in-game currency on it. Well, these criminals are able to use this to essentially get access to someone's online gaming account. Then that account has saved payment information on it, and then what the criminal will do is they'll purchase like a gift card for that in-game currency, and then they'll take the code and resell that code somewhere else, and that's how they monetize. Another example is last year we saw a lot of accounts for several fitness tracker companies were being traded. You might ask yourself, why would a criminal want access to my Fitbit trading or my Fitbit tracking account? Well, what are they going to do with that? To see if I got to my step count for the day? No, they're using these stolen accounts to determine which accounts have warranties on them that have not been used. And so oftentimes these fitness trackers will be sold with a warranty. The attacker will get access to someone's compromised fitness tracking account, and then they'll request the warranty basically to get a replacement device, and then they'll take that replacement device and sell it at a secondhand market and for just under retail. And so they're able to take that. We've seen those accounts trading for as little as $5, take that $5 account and turn that into however much, that particular fitness tracking device might be worth just under retail.
And is there a way that the hackers can take personal information and help them gain entry into an employer's system?
Yes, that FBI notification that I talked about, there was another example in that in which there were criminals that were launching a credential stuffing campaign on a banking system, and they were able to get in, and according to the study of that particular incident, once they were looking at the accounts that were compromised in the credential stuffing campaign, some of them did belong to employees and systems administrators and others that had privileged access. So they're looking. We've also seen places like where developers will keep their source code. So places like GitHub, for example, can be a hot target because attackers know that, oh, hey, this company's code might be there, and if this developer is reusing their password, I can get into this account and get access to the crown jewels.
Are there a few steps that individuals as well as businesses can take to protect their data from cybercriminals?
Yes. So use a password manager. I personally have fought with a lot of my friends and family members to get them to use a password manager. It's really quite easy. You only have to remember one really long password that you do not use anywhere else. And then the rest is just really easy. You don't even have to remember passwords. And ideally, you should never use a password that you can easily remember. If you can't remember it, someone else probably can't crack it. And enable multi-factor authentication everywhere. There are ways around that, but it's better to have it than to not. We've heard of people doing like SIM swapping attacks where they'll contact the phone carrier and basically get the SIM swapped to another device so that they can then intercept the MFA token. So whenever you can, do not use SMS-based, text-based multi-factor authentication. Always use something like a Google Authenticator or there's a few of those apps out there over SMS-based multi-factor authentication. And join a breach notification platform so you can become aware whenever your information does get out there. And so that way you can get ahead of it, but before criminals have time to use it.
So before we wrap up, for anyone who'd like to find out more about the dark web and your work, what are some resources that you'd recommend?
So you can go to spycloud.com and you can check your email there. You can sign up for free breach monitoring there as well. If you want to learn what a targeted account takeover attack looks like, we have several resources on our blog and on our company site where you can find that. We also have a breach exposure report, where we took where we analyzed, risk to the Fortune 1000 employees, including infographics from all 21 industries. So there's a ton of stuff on our blog. Like I said, the Nintendo post where we actually got the source code to a Chromeware tool, which was that Nintendo account checker we had talked about. That's on there, as well as several case studies.
And I do highly recommend to our audience to take advantage of that tracking on your email. And you can even do it for your business domain. The way I found Dustin and Spycloud, we had your CEO, Ted Ross, as a keynote speaker at a different event. And he did some like live hacking in the audience, and it was fascinating to see the risk of a full domain for an organization. So definitely check that out. All of those resources that Dustin just mentioned are actually in the show notes for the podcast. Finally, Dustin, what's one message that you would like to leave our audience around accounting and finance professionals being able to go beyond disruption?
Sure. You might have a security team at your organization, but you as an individual are not powerless. All we have is time, and you can waste a lot of criminals' time by not being an easy target and staying vigilant.
Very well said. Well, thank you, Dustin. We greatly appreciate your time today. There's plenty more to explore about cybersecurity, so be sure to tune in to our other episodes on this very topic. To see the links, just click on the episode's info icon in the podcast app on your smartphone or tablet, or open the episode in your computer's web browser. You'll find everything right there. There's some other websites we'd recommend for listeners interested in taking this further. Start at gobeyonddisruption.com or jump straight into our brand new portal at future.aicpa.org. That's future.aicpa.org. Go there for courses, webinars, and other professional development resources. Much of it is available at no charge that will help keep you ahead of the curve. If you've enjoyed this episode, go tell someone about it. You can also contact us directly via the feedback link in our show notes. We're always keen to know what you think and what you'd like to hear more of. From the AICPA, CIMA, and CPA.com, I'm Kacee Johnson. We'll be back soon with more conversations that help you and your profession to go beyond disruption. Till next time, keep listening and keep safe.
Thanks
Goodbye.
for listening to this episode of Beyond Disruption, brought to you by the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants. Learn more about today's topic at AICPA-CIMA.com/disruption. This podcast is designed to provide illustrative information with respect to the subject matter covered and does not represent an official opinion or position of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants or any of its subsidiaries or affiliates. It is provided with the understanding that the association, its affiliates, and subsidiaries are not engaged in rendering legal, accounting, or other professional services. If such advice or expert assistance is required, the services of a competent professional person should be sought. The association, its subsidiaries, and affiliates make no representations, warranties, or guarantees as to and assume no responsibility for the content or application of the material contained herein and expressly disclaim all liability for such damages arising out of the use of, reference to, or reliance on such material.